This declaration was orchestrated by the Safe Homes Initiative. As you will see, it's been signed by over 30 leading charities and organisations, and the declaration was made in response to recent figures from the Independent Monitoring Board at the UK's largest women's prison, HMP Bronzefield. And this declaration calls on the government to stop setting up vulnerable women to fail by releasing them from prison to homelessness. Here are the key asks. To ask the government to roll out its temporary accommodation service for prison leavers to all probation regions in England and Wales. As many of you will know, the government has committed to rolling out the scheme, but has yet to provide any timelines for this work. And the scheme should include the provision of specialist brokers for housing in every prison responsible for accommodation outcomes. It should also include other measures to cater for the specific needs of women and support these women into safe and permanent accommodation beyond those 12 weeks of support. We're asking the government to collect and record data disaggregated by sex, making this data available at a local level, and advocating for a standardised measure of accommodation outcomes for women leaving prison across all relevant public, private and voluntary sector agencies. And then finally, to advocate that local multi-agency groups work towards that whole system approach for women in the criminal justice system and adopt a best practice protocol.
Our independently obtained data have consistently shown that the number of women leaving prison to homelessness, much of which is hidden, is of the order of 60 to 75%. IMBs in all but 2 of the 12 women's prisons in England and Wales carried out surveys of prisoners about to be discharged in both 2019 and 2020. The 2 surveys showed that the percentage of women being discharged to no fixed abode was 62 and 59% respectively. In July 2021, the prison's own figures at Bronzefield had leapt to 77% of women not having safe and secure accommodation at the point of discharge from prison. These figures have been challenged by government departments, but on what basis? Here, there are several important factors to consider. First, multiple agencies are involved, and yet there is no common agreement on defining categories of housing outcomes, and importantly, which are considered acceptable for women leaving prison. Second, for many people, homelessness means rough sleeping, but women are the hidden homeless, preferring to return to exploitative and/or abusive relationships, or simply sofa surf rather than sleep rough. Finally, women make up only 4% of the prison population, and as a result, they have been victims of one-size-fits-all policies which do not take into account important gender-specific differences. There is also a general failure within official statistics to disaggregate data according to gender. But to return to that truly shocking figure of 77% of women leaving Bronzefield without suitable accommodation. This was challenged by the newly reorganised probation service on a case-by-case comparison of 29 women. The prison considered that only 7 of those 29 women had satisfactory accommodation on discharge, while the probation service felt that the figure was 21 out of 29. Let me give you some examples where there was a discrepancy. First, a prisoner who, on the day of discharge, had no idea where she would be sleeping that night, but did have an appointment with the housing department of the local authority where she had lived previously for later that day. Second, a perpetrator of domestic abuse discharged back to the home where her victims were living. And finally, a woman returning to her previous accommodation, which in fact turned out to be a tent.
Over the past 6 years, I've seen the same women return time and time again to prison due to homelessness in the majority of cases. Many ask for a longer sentence, as prison is a better option than sleeping in a public lavatory, stairwell, street or bin chute. I have been told that they often commit a crime in order to return to prison to have food, warmth and to feel safe at night with no fear of being raped. Some women tell me that they seek shelter in a crack house if they are homeless, which inevitably leads them back to a life of drugs, crime and further imprisonment.
In spring 2019, some regular volunteers with our London Prisons mission had been visiting Bronzefield prison and learned from the prison and from the Independent Monitoring Board that about 50 per week women were leaving to homelessness. The prison were doing all they can, but were very worried about the consequences of this. Well, we joined with the Prison Reform Trust and St Martin in the Fields to set up this initiative, Safe Homes for Women Leaving Prison. It is conclusive evidence that the parts of the criminal justice system which allows this to happen to so many vulnerable women is a serious failure and must be changed. Only government can do that.
I think for me, the biggest shock when we're talking about homelessness, and a lot of women are released into hostels, and the number of women that are released into hostels that have men in as well absolutely shocks me. A lot of women I speak to say there may be 2 women and 16 men, and they find it so difficult to live there that they then become homeless and they're then breaching licence conditions because the place that they are placed, they don't feel as safe.
And again, just really important about what kind of accommodation are we providing. There's a difference between a roof over someone's head and a safe place that can be called home.
So our award-winning Project Kylie was launched in 2018. And since then, we've worked with 18 women who have been classified as having complex needs. By following our holistic housing first method, we've produced wraparound support to all women, ensuring that they have the suitability of being housed at their choice of a location. Now, usually traditional methods of support will see clients requiring to adhere to a long list of rules and regulations, but we've seen success in providing unconditional, tailored support to our clients for as long as they want. So all women have successfully sustained their tenancies. And traditionally, the women have reported that they have often felt marginalised or mistreated by various services in the past, which has simply just led to mistrust. And because of that, a core aspect of our project is empowering our women to actively take control in being able to access support. And whether this is access to health and sexual health, or whether this is to take on bigger steps to obtaining guidance to make active changes around their traumatic experience of domestic violence and abuse. The other wins of the project has been a massive reduction in offending and a significant drop in the substance misuse. It's also worth mentioning that there's no other traditional type of support that has achieved these type of results. After we've actually done the cost modelling exercise, we're able to sustainably say that Project Kylie, it would, or any similar service of its kind, is half the cost of what supported accommodation would be and produces vastly better outcomes. We know that the project is cost effective. We also know it produces fantastic results, and the model is ready to be rolled out across the UK. So if the government is serious about ending homelessness, this is the type of project that it should be funding. And a national approach can be scaled up on this kind of, for complex needs women. It can actually be done. But you know, it's not the answer to everything. The answer isn't Project Kylie to everything. What we've actually just done is evidence a way of working using the housing first model, which is basically we've used the model, and what we've done is just not made it generic. We've made it very niche and very specific to women leaving prison, and then actually trialled it on that way. And we have found some particular successes of it.
Is there one thing that you would pick out, Rose, that you have really benefited from Project Kylie directly? If you had to choose one thing, what might that be?
Again, my life back on track, really. Like spiritual, self-confident, but that being housed, that's number one.
The solution isn't investing in 500 new prison places for women. Actually, it's investing in what we know works, women's centres, and actually having the emphasis on that and supporting women who have ended up in the criminal justice system to turn their lives around, and women's centres are proven to work on that. And if we then look at sort of at housing and making sure that we're investing in that, so that when women leave prison, they've got the tools and the support to end up not reoffending. Building the 500 new women's places seems to me to be looking at it the completely wrong way.
And we know that all parties agree that we need to address this issue. We need to stop the plans to build the prisons places for women. That's £200 million of public money that could transform this area really, really quickly.
So keen on the fact that there are lots of examples of good practice and lessons to learn from all those declaration signatories as well as others, and they are not being applied. It is not rocket science. We've got the knowledge. Please hear it.